Welcome back, everybody, to the Informed Home Buyer Podcast. I am your host, as always, Rich Curtis, with my co-host here, Dave Miller. Morning, Dave.
Good morning, Rich. Thanks for having me.
All right, today we are bringing a topic that we think is timely and will help a lot of people to reframe their decision making, and that is, how do I approach my home buying strategy with the amount of financial uncertainty in the marketplace right now? Due to the fiscal policy of the new administration, we have a lot of uncertainty hanging out there. When is he going to do the tariffs? How high are the tariffs going to be? What are the retaliatory tariffs going to be like? Will the American economy shift to buying more U.S. goods, or are we really going to feel the upward inflationary pressure that is predicted with the tariffs? How will the immigration policy affect our overall economy? How will the thousands of federal workers who have just been fired or laid off affect the economy? And these are going to be regionally specific as well, depending on how many federal workers you might have in your area. So with this much uncertainty in the economy, how do we change our home buying strategy? And if you've been saving up for a while, you've been watching our podcast, hopefully you've been learning and you've been thinking about buying a home, probably the home you have in your mind is your forever home. The big, beautiful white picket fence, 4 bedrooms, 2,500 square feet, forever home to raise your family in. And we're here to talk today about whether that is the wisest strategy in this type of market with this much financial uncertainty, or does it make more sense to buy a starter home and maintain more financial flexibility and more emergency fund for your family and ride out the next 4 years of financial uncertainty and then make a decision as fiscal policy changes again with another administration? So we're going to walk you through both those scenarios so you can decide which one's right for your family. So let's start, Dave, with that sort of forever home idea. In our market, we usually use about a $500,000 purchase price for your median or average home. So in Placerville, that'd be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,700 square foot house on anywhere from a quarter to a half an acre. Kind of close to that starter home. And maybe at 400, 450, you'd be down more like a 1,200 square foot starter home type of thing. Now, our forever home in a market like Placerville might be more like 650 to 735. A forever home down where you live in Folsom is going to start in the your median is going to be 750. So your forever home might be more of an 800 to 900 in Folsom. So can you give us an idea financially what that looks like, buying a home at that level?
Yeah, really. Yeah, absolutely, Rich. And you bring up a couple points there is when we're talking about when you're making this determination to buy, as you said, oftentimes people go out, they look for that naturally to look for the forever home. Is this somewhere that I could live forever? One of the things that you and I always do, Rich, is every client is different. Every client scenario is different. There's no two clients are the same. So where are you at in your life? Do you have kids already? Are you planning on having kids? Do you have teenage kids that are maybe off at college that may come back? So, we want to talk through all those potential scenarios for you that are, the buyer that's considering buying a home, and is the timing right? And from a conservative approach, and with uncertainty, we talk about buying that maybe starter home, the smaller home, that still will support your family how it is today. Certainly, you don't want to buy a home that's not going to support your family needs today. But, can you, if you're currently renting, what does that look like? What's your rent payment look like? Are you in a 3-2? Well, if you buy a 3-2, maybe it's a little smaller, but it still supports your family and your family dynamic today, but it's not your forever dream home. What does that look like from a cost perspective? What does that give you in terms of wealth building and potential down the road? How do you use that to leverage buying your forever home, and what's that timing look like? So these are all things we'll address.
And I think we always talk about things in terms of a range, because we can't give you specific interest rates because that's going to be very specific to you. But a ballpark range at a $800,000 house with 20% down, sort of monthly payment wise, what are we looking at?
Yeah, well, let's do this, Rich. Go ahead and I have a mortgage amortization calculator up here. I'm going to go to this now, and if you want to share that, I'll start with the 500,000, which I have up, and then we'll bump it up to 800,000. Then we'll talk about, what that payment looks like and how much goes to principal versus interest every month. Are you now sharing that?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay,
Got
so
it.
looking at a home price of 500,000, say you've put together enough to put 10% down or 50,000 down plus closing costs, 30-year fix. I just plugged in a 6.75 interest. That's not guarantee anyone's interest rate, just on a mortgage calculator here. What does that look like? Property taxes are 1.25. We'll say $200 a month or $2,400 a year for insurance.
Now
Some
that would
mortgage,
be like buying in Folsom.
yeah,
In
yeah,
Placerville, that would
or
be
maybe
more
Cameron
like
Park
5 grand.
area.
Yeah,
We
probably still 3,500 to 5 grand in Cameron Park these days.
All
It's
right,
getting hard
let's
with
go
the insurance.
3,600 on the insurance.
There we go. Run it down the middle. And so for
There
the
we
people watching, you did this. You'll have to adjust these parameters based on where you. If you were buying in Placerville, we'd put 5,000 in the homeowner's insurance, right? So just
Yep.
depends on where you're
Yeah, and
going.
based on the size of the home, so for a starter home, there's a good chance it's not going to be 5,000. I mean,
If
well,
you're
yeah, it
1,200
just
square
depends.
feet, yeah.
Yeah. And so if we kind of use an average here at 3,600, now we could look at your monthly payment. Oh, you know what? Let me hit calculate. It's going to recalculate this. And this is going to show your monthly payment, principal and interest, plus your taxes, your insurance, your mortgage insurance. You know, that went per year. Let me change that. That I did that monthly. Let's go 1,200. And there you go. Let me recalculate that. And now we're looking at $3,900 a month to
on
cover
your
everything.
500,000, which is a good median for most of our markets here.
Right, that is correct. Now, keep in mind is you might be renting a similar home and you might be paying, you know, $2,400, $2,600 a month for that home, just based on square footage,
Yeah.
on averages, depending on where you're renting. But the other piece to this is what we talked to is that's your payment, but how much goes towards principal and interest. So if I come down here into a monthly amortization schedule, um, in fact, I did something doesn't look right down here. Okay, let's go to the monthly schedule. Okay, so if you look at this monthly schedule, every month that you make a mortgage payment, the bulk of that's going to go towards interest, and then the balance will go towards principal based on the interest rate. So every month you could see about $3 additional goes towards principal, $3, $2 to $3 gets removed from interest. So over time, as you look here, after 1 year, you're already paying $412 of your mortgage payment is doing a principal reduction.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you're anticipating this starter home being maybe a 5-year plan. Go down to the end of year 5 here. We're looking at year 4, year 5. So now you're paying $577 a month, and you've done a principal reduction where your now mortgage balance is 415,000 versus starting at 450,000. So you've paid down about $35,000 in 5 years in principal reduction. And just for, you know, the heck of it, I'll go ahead and scroll down more and get to year 10, and you can see as time passes at the end of year 10, you know, you're now paying $800 a month goes towards principal, and you've already paid down, shoot, $75,000 off of your mortgage. So, you know, the longer you own this home, so maybe you've converted this home to a rental, and you know, it's pretty fair to say in 10 years that rents will have gone up. You know, if we just use basic inflation rates at 2%, you're paying 2,400. Pretty simple math there, but you know, that's going to be over $3,000 a month in rental income that you're gaining from that same starter home. So let me come back up here, Rich. Then you brought up a good point here. So you're looking at, and again, we're using, you know, kind of an interest rate range in the market today. So $3,900 a month. Now, what does that $850,000 house look like? So if I type in 850,000, and now, we'll just go 20% down, and we'll use the same interest rate, and I'll get rid of PMI because ideally and let's calculate that. Nope, no positive PMI. I'll put 0, calculate. Now you're looking at a mortgage payment of $5,679. So pretty significant increase, as well as this includes putting 20% down, or, you know, basically 170,000 plus closing costs. So what does that mean for you as a buyer? How long do you have to wait to be able to do this? Shoot, even if you were to put less money down on this and we were use the same scenario and put 10% down, and then have mortgage insurance, and we'll call it 250 a month. Calculate, now you're looking at 6251 because you're putting less money down, but you're $75,000 less down or 85,000 less down. You're looking at a payment of 6251. That's a pretty significant increase versus that starter home.
Yeah, you're looking about $2,300 a month more going out on your mortgage payment, plus the additional you had to pull from savings to buy that house, plus the additional cost of maintenance and electricity and utilities to run that larger home. So it's pretty significant difference between the two. And I think the point here is, does it make sense with this level of financial uncertainty to take on that additional burden right now? And so it's really helpful to see these numbers when you're considering these two options, to see that, wow, that is significant. What could I do for my family with an extra $2,100 a month that I don't have to spend on mortgage costs? And where this really comes into play is, say you have a job loss. Right now we have thousands of federal employees who are being fired or laid off. Or say you are one of those federal employees who hasn't been fired or laid off right now, but you just don't know when you'll be on the chopping block, right? So if you're purchasing a home because you do have stable employment, but you have some worries around that, does it make more sense to buy that more modest starter home, $2,200, $2,300 less a month, a lot less money out of pocket down, which leaves you some freeboard if you have a job loss? That additional down payment money that you didn't have to spend to get the $850,000 house can be in an emergency fund to cover some months while you look for another job. Or maybe that $2,300 less a month mortgage payment means, in worst case scenario, if you lost your job, your spouse could cover that amount, could cover the mortgage while you looked for a job. So given the uncertainty in the marketplace right now, does it make sense to ratchet your expectations down, maybe buy more of a starter home? And I know that can feel like a lock-in or a letdown, but we're about to show you a couple of other strategies where you can leverage that starter home in just a few years' time, when the uncertainty is past, to do some really cool things for your life. So I think, Dave, if you were coming into this thinking to buy that forever home, and then we're saying, hey, why don't you look at the 15 or 1700 square foot home or the 1200 square foot home, so the 2500 square foot home, that can be a big letdown, but I think there is huge upside and huge sort of safety factor in that for people's families.
Yeah, sure. And it's really about giving yourself options and having a strategy. And I can speak from experience. Anyone that bought their first house, it's scary. It's
Yeah.
oh crap, what am I doing? Is this the right, And I think that, especially in California, more people that bought a home are look back and we're glad that they did it, and they were able to establish more wealth or leverage that real estate asset for whatever avenues that's going to help them in their life. So
Yeah.
so your alternatives are to rent or to continue to rent. It's to look at a starter home and understand what flexibilities a starter home gives you, or look at your forever home. We deal with all of our clients, Rich, and we may talk to some clients that say, heck no, I don't want to look at a starter home. I want that forever home. I'm willing to do
Yeah.
that now because, I've been renting for 10 years or whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Or they know their income's going up, or they know they have some inheritance coming, or a trust fund
yes.
maturing, or there's all kinds of scenarios in which you're going to be okay, then charge forward and buy that forever home. But
Yeah.
if you are someone who is being affected by the uncertainty in the marketplace right now, or buying a home for you is more of a razor thin margin, then you sort of only have two options. One is to just pause and not buy, or the
Yep.
other is to look at the starter home. So let's talk about what the starter home gets you. So we're not talking about buying a rundown, crappy fixer
Mm,
upper that you're going to hate living in. We're talking about just buying a slightly more modest home that you can then leverage upward. So let's say you buy that starter home, and you live in it for those 5 years. Right now, that gets us to the next administration, when fiscal policy will likely change, or we will see the results of this fiscal policy. So the uncertainty will have been removed about what's going to happen. What can you do then? Well, you have one option is to refinance the home, pull money out, and buy your forever home using that money you've pulled out as a down payment, right?
Yep.
Um, and then you can convert that one into a rental. And so let's talk through sort of the math on that, the things you have to be looking for. So if you're going to refinance and pull money out, then your payment's going to go up, and you have to make sure that the rent's going to cover that payment. So let's talk through that a little bit for folks.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Rich. And so that's why earlier when I brought up the amortization schedule is, what's your appetite for having a rental and does it make sense? And Rich, I know there's been a couple clients and that we've talked through this before that have reached out to you and said, "Hey, Rich, you sold me that starter home 5, 7 years ago. I'm ready to move up." And the advice I know you've given them was, if you sell that house, I'll buy it. Or, I highly
Yeah.
recommend if you are in a position where you don't need to buy that house, it may behoove you to hang on to it. Now, that's not for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So, but these are options and these are strategies. And anyone out there that's looking at this podcast and people that maybe have rentals, rentals are, there's pros and cons to owning a rental. And, we can, on a separate podcast or whatever, we could talk through the pros and cons, but it's also an opportunity for you to build additional wealth and diversify your portfolio. And so, but buying that starter home first gives you the opportunity to do so versus buying that forever home. So there's a couple other factors that I want to bring up. You buy that forever home now and something changes in your life, you need to move, you need job changes. It's less likely that you're going to be able to keep that forever home, turn it into a rental because the cash flow will be so negative on that.
Yeah.
Versus that starter home where you might be able to rent it out for $500 less than what your payment is. But we're talking 5 years down the road, we go to the amortization schedule and that $500 just goes towards principal. So even though you're paying $500 more a month and you don't have enough rental income over time, that's going to do that principal reduction to a point where, and as rents continue to go up, you will start being cash positive.
Yeah. And you also have the option, let's jump back to that amortization schedule.
Yeah.
You also have the option to refinance. Throw the $500,000 scenario
Yeah. You
back
know
in
what?
there.
That's exactly where I was going, Rich, because
Great minds think alike. Yeah.
you're going to be shocked when you see this. So we have that down payment, 6%. We're using the same interest rate. Home insurance, I'll go PMI a year. We'll go, let's just keep this. I'll go at 1,200. Which your PMI when you refinance may go away if you have 20% equity. Let me calculate this. Okay, so payment 3922. Now, fast forward, we have no idea. We're not predicting where rates are going to be, but this is often the way, looking back over the last 20 plus years that we've been working together, Rich, we've seen interest rates go up. We've seen interest rates come down. If folks have an opportunity to refinance just 1 percentage point. So actually, before I do this, let me keep it at the 6.75. This
Yeah, let's just
is
adjust the
pretty,
down payment because you've now paid it down, right? So, your mortgage value, I think at 10 years out or 5 years out, your mortgage had gone down by at 5 years like $36,000.
yeah,
So
that is correct. So
that's
looking
going to
at this
shave
and
your
what,
payment down as well.
yeah,
If
correct.
you just did a
So
rate and term refi.
correct. So right now, you bring up a really good point. This is a annual amortization schedule. So we start at a loan balance of 445. Okay, and if we continue to scroll down at through the end of year 5, 422,000. So let's just just for and you have to build in the cost of refinance. So maybe that's 3 or 4 thousand bucks. So I'm just going to call this 426,000. Okay. 426,000. Now, even though you're stretching it over 30 years, but say that interest rate was 5.75. If you notice this number here, your principal and interest was 2918. I hit 5.75. You go from 2918 down to 2237.
Yeah. And so that's dramatic. And then all of a sudden you instead of refinancing necessarily and pulling money out to buy up, if you've saved up to buy up, you can just refinance, do a rate and term refinance, take advantage of the built-in equity that you have, and bring your payment down to make it a break even or cash positive rental at that moment. Caveat to that, of course, that we need to point out is Dave did show you earlier on the amortization schedule that at the beginning of a loan, you're paying very little to principal. So when you do that rate and term refi, you've restarted the loan. So now you are back to paying less to principal again, and it goes up every month. So there is a reset there that happens. So you have now got your payment down to where you can make it a break even or a positive rental. But you do restart the loan repayment cycle and you are paying less each month to principal. But all of that's being paid for you by somebody else. And you take your
Yeah.
cash savings and you go buy your forever home at that point, and you have two homes working for you instead of one. And that the client Dave's talking about, who I said, if you're going to sell that, I'll buy it, is one of my favorite neighborhoods, Tahoe Park, Elmhurst, East Sacramento. It's right by the UC Davis Med Center. It will have a consistent rental pool of high quality, college nurses, traveling nurses, that kind of rental pool, and doctors forever in that neighborhood. And that rental today, gosh, it might be 10, 15 years down the line now, is still chugging along for them, going up in rent every year, going down in principal every year. And they've moved on and bought two more forever houses in two different neighborhoods from that original home. And that rental is still chugging along and doing great things for them. And by the way, if the defecation hit the oscillation majorly for them financially, they could sell the forever home and move back in to the little bungalow in Elmhurst or East Sac or Tahoe Park neighborhood. If they lost their jobs tomorrow, they could move back in. If they fast forward another 10 years down the road, they're empty nesters and they want to retire early and travel some more, they can sell the forever home and move back into the bungalow because now they don't have kids that need to come back home. So the kids get to the age of wanting to have their own home, and let's face it, affordability is not getting any better. Maybe the kids can't afford to buy a home. They can sell that starter home to their children or put children in there, or an aging family member. So it's not just financial flexibility. Having that starter home gives you a lot of life flexibility. Even if it took you 10 years to convert and move up to the forever home, having that starter home still there as a resource for your family gives you a ton of flexibility moving forward.
Right. And I don't want to get too deep into the technicalities of it, but also um, when you convert that starter home to a rental, now there's a couple things is, there's some capital gains that once you move out of that house beyond, you have to live in it 2 out of the last 5 years before you sell it to avoid some capital gains. Now you make a decision, am I going to keep this home beyond that 5-year period, or where I've lived in it 2 out of the last 5 years? But you could always vacate that home, be longer than 5 years. I've utilized this strategy. Then at some point move back in the home and reestablish your primary residence for capital gains. But the other benefit is when you convert it to a rental, even though your payments, you also get to use what's called depreciation. So you get to depreciate that property over 27 and a half years. And again, I don't want to be careful. I'm not, you'd have to see a CPA or a tax advisor. I don't give tax advice, but there's some benefits or tax benefits that reduce your cost on maintaining that home. So there's a lot of other moving parts that incentivize or make it more cost effective to maintain that starter home as a rental.
Yeah. And I think that's the primary benefit of the starter home strategy, and why I think it's such a good strategy in a volatile or uncertain economic times, is it gives you flexibility. If you buy the forever home today, you get Dave line you up for a loan. We go out, I find you your beautiful forever home with the swimming pool and the backyard barbecue and the 5 bedrooms and all of that. And you buy that today. And all this tariff business and everything really nukes the economy, and the real estate values go down. You're now upside down in a very expensive home. And if you lose your job or you can't make the payments, you're now upside down and having to try to sell that at a loss or get foreclosed on, right? If you want to move out of state or move somewhere else to be with an aging family member or whatever, you really only have one option. It's very hard to convert that to a rental because it won't produce enough rent to offset its own cost. It also, from a rental perspective, you would not buy a forever home and rent that out and let people beat up that asset. That asset is going to suffer a reduction in value by being beat up by renters. Because let's face it, renters just don't take care of your house like it's their own most of the time. I mean,
Right.
I've been lucky and have had some that do and that are amazing, and you try to keep them forever. And then you have ones that beat up the place. It's just part of being a landlord. And so it's just not as viable an option to convert that forever home to a rental. So you have one option. You buy the forever home and things change. You have to sell the forever home and hope you're not caught out and have to get foreclosed on in the forever home. So in uncertain times, that forever
Yeah.
home represents a lot more risk. With the starter home, you can refinance it and turn it into a rental just by doing a rate and term and reducing the cost. So it's an income producing rental. And then go rent another house somewhere else if you have to move, or buy another house if you've saved up some money. You can refinance it and pull that money out in order to buy another house if the math makes sense, right? Or you can stay in it because you can still afford it, right? So
Right.
it gives you three options there. And as the uncertainty filters out, because it will, right? I think when times are uncertain or scary or hard, there's a tendency to feel like it will be forever, but it's never forever. We've been through things like this before. I mean, Dave and I early in our careers went through the Great Recession where everybody thought that was it for the US economy, and it's bounced back wildly since then. So with the starter house, you can let that uncertainty play out while you have some security. You've saved some money in your emergency fund. Every month you're putting out less money. You can watch and let this play out, but still benefit all of the benefits of homeownership. Still be paying down principal, still have a forced savings account, still be participating in the appreciation. Because as of now, the National Association of Realtors has not adjusted their 15 to 25% appreciation over the next 5-year projections. There is uncertainty, but there is not, none of these fiscal policies are actually enacted or playing out yet. So there's no reason to adjust those expectations. So we are still looking at seeing appreciation, get a little bit less appreciation, right? 15 to 25% of 500,000 is less than 15 to 25% of 850,000, but you're still participating in all of the benefits of home ownership. Say the inflation does go rampant. Well, you have now locked in your biggest line item in your monthly budget, your housing costs. You've just locked them in at a lower amount because you bought that starter house. You're still not suffering by rents going up along with inflation and all of that. So all of the benefits of home ownership are on offer to you while taking risk off the table. And I think that is not a mindset that people sort of employ in home buying, right? We employ that in our stock portfolios. This is a time when people are selling things off and taking risk off the table in their portfolios. I think it's time for our home buyer clients, Dave, and I'd like to hear your thought on it, to consider taking risk off the table in their home purchases too.
Yeah, and I think there's two aspects to that, Rich. There's one is the emotional side, right? Emotional side. You've experienced this how many times where you've known a price range for a client and you've taken them and looked at a $500,000 house, a $600,000 house, and a $700,000 house. What's the excitement level on that $700,000 house versus the $500,000 house, right? It's, the granite countertops, the picket fence, whatever that may be. It usually has all those things, but it's in time, right? At the right place and time in your life. And maybe you're in a position where that's the house that you're going to buy now. And that may make sense for you, but from a conservative approach and a investment strategy approach, and we use I think you used the analogy before, Rich, playing Monopoly, right? You have the ability to do that and buy smaller and gradually increase. And I've bought and sold several houses, and anytime I was going to buy a house, the thought press was, what happens if I get stuck with this house? Oftentimes I'd buy a house with the intention of selling it and selling it in a reasonable amount of time. But in this, I didn't know 6 months, a year down the road, what the market was going to look like. I was always prepared. If I get stuck with this, how does this pencil out? What can I rent it out for? Can I cover my expenses? And so it just gave me that peace of mind to know I wasn't taking too much risk. I'm not going to swing for the fences. I'm going to be conservative and know that I'm going to leverage the bank's money for the loan, buy this house, and use that strategy. And the other piece to that is, like you brought up, Rich, if the crap hit the fan and you now maybe need to move back home with the in-laws or mom and dad or whatever that may be, and it's not going to be forever, but now instead of taking a foreclosure on that house or selling it on a short sale, if the market were to change, you could rent that house out and probably cover a good portion of your mortgage. So it just gives you that flexibility, where with that, forever home, you might be upside down quite a bit more a month.
Yeah, I think to my leaving California people, and I'm not one of you. I've lived in this state my whole life. I love it to death. I think it's one of the greatest places to live in the nation. I'm staying. But over the last 5 years, I've had a lot of clients leave for places like Nevada, Tennessee, Texas. And I've had a huge percentage of them find out that the grass was simply not greener. A lot of my Texas clients found out there's no public land in Texas, no place to go hiking. It's all privately owned. The water is really expensive. The income taxes was less. That's great, but I bought a massive house, and it turns out the property taxes are huge in Texas compared to California. The water bills are huge, and I've had a bunch of them come back. Had they been working this strategy, had they bought the starter home, bounced to Texas, rented out the starter home, found it wasn't for them, they could have come back to California so much easier. It is really hard to come back to California real estate prices once you've left. So the other thing this starter home strategy gives you is, hey, have you been kicking the tires on trying another place out, but you still got to work for a couple of years. You got a kid you want to get through middle school or through high school. This gives you the opportunity to go try another place. No risk. Rent this place out. And if you want to come back to California, you always can. You have this house here as a rental. So that kind of flexibility that this provides, it really does take a lot of that risk off the table, in my opinion. And I always advocate for people to be a little more financially conservative with this decision. Also, the stock market, and we are not financial advisors. Stock market's been tanking the last few days. There's been some great buying opportunities. What if you put less down on a smaller house and you had some money to stuff into your retirement accounts at, discounted prices? While a lot of people we know made their wealth during the Great Recession when there were great buying opportunities. Might not be the time to wrap up all of your money into a down payment on a house, right? Like it's not all negatives when the economy shifts on us.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point, Rich, is when we talk about buying that starter home, it's your owner occupied home. You could put as little as, 3.5%, 3% down, or maybe 100% financing, depending on the different loan programs.
Yeah.
Then when you rent that out, you don't have to pull money out of it to go buy your another house. If you're able to save a little bit money because it is your starter home and you're putting more money away, when you go buy your next primary resident, you could put as little as 3% down, 5% down. Like,
Yeah.
you are leveraging that option to leverage the bank's money, to buy that home. You're not required to save, for that forever home. You don't have to save your 170,000 for that $850,000 house for down payment. So
Yeah.
you have options. Maybe it makes sense at that point in time to sell that starter home and, roll some of those, that equity, if hopefully you have equity at that time, into that new home. Those are decisions that you could make at that point in time. But the one thing I will say is time goes by fast. And so if you're sitting here watching this and you think, okay, this is a great strategy, fast forward 1 year, if you haven't done anything, and I'm not trying to encourage someone to do something today right away that they're not ready to, but I just know, time is the biggest factor in terms of what we call like compounding interest. So building wealth, the longer you own an asset, the more wealth, value it becomes typically.
Yeah. And the more, when it comes to housing costs, the more uncertainty you take off the table for yourself by locking in that housing cost. So
Yeah.
Dave and I don't have a dog in this fight, so to speak, when it comes to whether you choose your forever house or your starter house. And do remember, people always like to, I think people always have an assumption that we want you to buy the biggest house you can because we are paid as a percentage of that and we make more money. So feel free, go buy the forever house. My paycheck will be bigger. I'm fine with it. But I think you owe it to yourself and your family to at least consider buying more conservative, buying a smaller, more modest house, and taking some risk off the table for you right now. There's that old advice, and you hear this a lot from your grandparents or parents: buy the biggest, baddest house you can afford right now. Income will go up. Life is going to be a hockey stick up and to the right. And I think history just has shown that's not always the case. So we don't care which house you choose. We don't care which price point you buy at. Our goal with this channel is always to help you make the highest quality real estate decisions you can from the comfort of your couch. So I hope this topic has given you a chance to sit back and think, those $800,000 houses we've been looking at on realtor.com and Zillow, they look really exciting. They're great, but is there a better play for our family here? Is there a way to be a little more conservative and have a little more financial safety as we watch things play out in the marketplace? Dave and I are not economists. Our read, well, my read, I'll speak for myself, of the tea leaves of the fiscal policy of the Trump administration is it looks very inflationary to me. It looks likely to make prices go up. And with what they're doing with jobs at the federal level, it looks to me like it will cause a lot of job loss and future unemployment based on the direction we're going. I will be elated to be proved wrong. This is not a partisan statement. This is just an economic one. And if I'm wrong and all of this comes up roses for all of us, great, I'm in. Just in case it doesn't, I think you owe it to yourself to consider, if you're about to make a home purchase, going a little more conservative.
Yeah, and I think Rich, you bring a really good. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is just employ other strategies and present these to you so you have options, and maybe a strategy you haven't thought about yet or haven't considered that is an option for you. We'll talk through all these. And at the end of the day, whatever, is the best for you in your personal situation, we're there to represent you, always to the best of our ability.
Yeah, I think we will wrap it there. Thank you all for spending a little over half an hour of your life listening to Dave and I prattle on about options. I hope this has given you some things to think about. I hope it has given you some food for thought. Sit back for just 1 second and consider what your life might be like if you bought a little bit smaller, a little bit cheaper house. Hope this helps you guys out. Thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one. I'm Rich Curtis.
I'm Dave Miller. Thank you.
All right, see you next time, guys.